Looking forward to it. So welcome everybody that's here so far. People may be joining us throughout the call. That's fine. We'll be recording this and sending it out to people that are not able to be there. I had a lot of people reach out to me this week that are like, oh, I have a kindergarten graduation celebration picnic at the dog park with my cousin, and like all the excuses. Is so busy right now. So I know there's a lot of people that will be listening to this after the fact, which is great because I think this is a timeless conversation that never expires. And I think it will be pertinent information for many years to come. So I'm glad for those of you that are here that are with us in real time, that you can ask your questions to us. Oh, hi, Sarah from Wichita, 3 boys and a 7-year-old daughter. Ooh, that's going to be a lot of fun. We're going to be sharing some of my tried and true tips. I have 3 daughters. I have one who's 15 who has gone through this whole kind of thing, and I'd like to think very successfully. I have an 8-year-old, and then I also have an almost 4-year-old. And so I'm in every stage of this conversation currently, because the conversation really does start when they're very young, and it really does continue well beyond the point where they actually are cycling. So I'm there. I know, Lisa, you've got a few of your own. You want to introduce yourself really quickly?
My name is Lisa. For those of you who might not know me, we'll introduce ourselves a little bit formally in just a moment, but I've got 2 daughters and they are they are ready. I can see it. I can see all the signs. And I told Leah, we need to make this webinar for me because I am petrified. I am petrified. I have tried to have this conversation and I am petrified. I am exactly the person who feels awkward, who feels icky is a word that comes to mind. I don't like talking about pain. And my children don't like talking about pain. And so I am encouraged and I need this topic. I'm going to be writing notes alongside, even though I'm co-hosting this event, just because I'm very excited to develop a new language and a new empowerment around this. So let me know if you are like me and you feel similarly, maybe just awkward, or you feel like you don't have the words. We are in this together, ladies. I'm so excited. I'm going to go ahead and fire up the screens because Leah has prepared all kinds of fun things for us tonight. All righty.
Well, let's be honest, Lisa, you've been right alongside me, helping me to understand this, because I will just start with my disclaimer a little bit. This was, it was a little awkward for me growing up, but I also grew up on a dairy farm. And so I feel like the conversation was a little different surrounding fertility. The birds and the bees were a little different on a farm with animals all around, seeing things happen all the time. So it's helpful for me to hear from other women, maybe that didn't have my upbringing, just how hard these words are to find, how awkward this is. So this is a really helpful conversation. So I really want you guys, tell me what is hard. Let's get into it. Let's talk about it. Okay. How to talk to your daughter about her first period. So again, I'm sure we're all running between events and activities and things, and I'm just so grateful that you found time in your day to carve out this moment. We are going to do everything we can to make this time very valuable for you. We want to make sure that you leave tonight having felt that what you came for was answered. So don't hesitate to ask those questions. We can't answer what you need if you don't ask us. So this is your invitation just to engage and for this next hour and to really pause, because I think this moment is, you're here for a reason. You're meant to learn something tonight, I think. Lisa and I are thrilled to host you. I'm the CEO and the founder of Guiding Star Project. Like I mentioned earlier, I have 3 daughters. I also have 4 sons. That makes me a mom to 7 kids. On top of being a mother to 7 children, I'm a wife of almost 20 years. I'm a board certified lactation consultant, an author, CEO, founder of a nonprofit organization. And I do a lot of speaking on issues pertaining to women's health. And crazy enough, I spoke at a women's conference this weekend and this topic came up. So my brain is fresh on this. We just had all kinds of women of all different ages talking about their experiences of their first periods. And wow, there was some trauma. So I'm excited to talk about it, but that's me. So Lisa, introduce yourself.
My name is Lisa Canning. I'm the author of the book, The Possibility Mom. I've got 9 kids on earth, 1 in heaven and 1 on the way currently. My oldest daughter is 12 and the next daughter is 9. And so I'm right at that very, very tender, very exciting. They're asking all kinds of questions. I did not grow up on a dairy farm. So my birds and bees conversation was, I think, a little bit different than Leah's. And it's interesting, in preparing for this evening, I realized just how much of my past experience is definitely informing all of my thoughts. I am a certified mindset coach through Metanoia Catholic, and I'm starting to realize, oh, wow, like I actually have a lot of thoughts about fertility maybe that have not been challenged. And so I'm very excited to become more aware. If you can relate to the things I'm saying, feeling awkward or feeling fearful, I am linking arms with you on this journey. I'm here to learn too.
All right. Well, I'm thrilled that, we're hosting this Holistic Feminism Symposium from the Guiding Star Project. And really the goal at Guiding Star has been for a long time to change the conversation on women's healthcare and to help empower you to be your own advocates in the exam room, out in the world, in the workplace, wherever you're at, so that we stop apologizing for living in these female bodies. And the most important part of this, you guys, is that we pass this narrative on to the next generation. So this conversation tonight is critical for us to build this kind of a holistic feminism worldview of what it means to live in our bodies as women and to not be ashamed of that. So to that end, Lisa, I'm going to hand this one off to you. I'll let you explain what the special invitation is.
A little bit later on this evening, after we cover tonight's topic of how to speak to your daughter about her first period, we'll be making a special invitation if you are intrigued of how to continue to change the culture and have more women have the change that I'm currently in real time going through myself, around just feeling empowered, having the language to feel empowered, how to talk not only to our daughters, but also just to the world at large, our doctors, our coworkers, our friends. Why is it not weird that we want to have a natural approach to fertility? Or why is it not weird to not treat things with a pill because it's easier? So if you would like to feel more engaged and empowered, we have a special invitation for you later on this evening. Leah, what are we going to talk about tonight?
Okay, so tonight I was thinking about this all week about what is the stuff to actually really get into the nitty gritty on this. And this is what I broke it down to, that we're going to talk about, why our own experience matters, well, how we sometimes bring in our own baggage, what language is helpful in these conversations, what's not helpful, and the basics of the female cycle. Because I can't assume that we all know. I can't assume that everybody on this call knows how to explain the basics of a female cycle. And then why this doesn't just need to be the talk. I think we put a lot of pressure on this idea that there's this single event called the talk. We'll get to that a little bit.
That is like my biggest hang up. I have definitely thought that this is a talk and it has to be so serious. And my husband and I are both like, how do we have the talk? So that last one is for me, Leah Jacobson. All right, Leah, let's start with, why does our own experience matters? We all come to the table in general. So my mindset coaching training informs me. We come to the table of everything, our motherhood, our work, how we think about other people, with a whole set of experiences. And it's not meant to be judged. It's just sort of neutral, to be honest. It's just reality. We all come with all kinds of experiences that inform the way we think about things. So Leah, when it comes to a first period, our fertility, what do we have to think about in terms of our own experience?
Absolutely. This one is critical because everything that you just said, the way that the words that you mentioned early on, that you said like icky or like that anxiety that you're feeling, that didn't come from nowhere. That came from somewhere. So we have to just really kind of dig in and say, where did I get these first concepts about my body? How did I feel when I had my period? Was I scared? Was I prepared? Did I feel ashamed? How did my first experience of puberty, of my period, of becoming a woman, how did it affect the way I viewed myself and thought that others viewed me? I shared in my book, my mom was actually so gracious because she let me share her story in my book, Holistic Feminism, of her first period. And I kind of shared it as a cautionary tale because it was bad. It was so bad. The poor thing, my mom in the 1960s, lived in a rural area, a little country school. She went to a one-room country school, which is kind of sweet and sounds like Little House on the Prairie, but it was actually like 1960. And she woke up and she was bleeding and had no idea what was happening to her. Thought she was dying, was so scared. But her first instinct in that moment, because she didn't have the relationship for whatever reason as an 11-year-old little girl, to talk to her mom. And so she tried to hide it. She thought maybe it would stop, so she wadded up the toilet paper, and went off to school, walked the mile down the road to the country schoolhouse. And it's a mess. It's not the way it's supposed to be handled. And so about halfway through the morning, she had been having a very difficult morning at school. The telephone rang in the schoolhouse and her teacher answered it, and it was her mom, and her mom said, "Send her home." And so her mom had been doing the laundry and realized, oh, okay, that must be what happened, and sent her home. So she ran the whole way home crying, thinking she's dying, and gets home. And my grandmother, sweet, bless her heart. She had a lot of children and just, great mother to all of them, but didn't really know how to talk about this and didn't really know how to handle it. Hadn't prepared her daughter for it. And so her response was just, you're not going to die, don't overreact. Here is a menstrual belt. At the time, it was the menstrual belts, with the big connected in the front and the back, like the belt. Like, oh my gosh, I'm so glad we didn't have to figure those out. And a little pamphlet, and sent her into the bathroom and said, "Read this. And if you have any questions, let me know." And then promptly left the kitchen, just left her there. And so my mom said she had to really figure it out on her own at 11 years old. It was a very lonely, kind of embarrassing experience for her. And crazy enough, she had two sisters that started cycling the same year. Her older sisters, all three of them, started cycling within the same year, but somehow they never talked about it. She had no idea what a period was and had no idea what to expect with it. And then never understood the reason for it. No one explained why it was happening, just that it would keep happening. So that's just a really kind of a cautionary tale of how we don't want this to go. So my mom, knowing that how traumatic that was for her, she really had to push herself outside of her comfort zone and her limits to do a knowledge check with me. When I was about 10 years old, she just kind of did a knowledge check to say, you do understand how these things are happening with the animals. You see a lot, you're on the farm. Do you understand how babies are made? Do you understand, when there's different times when the cows are in heat or the animals are in heat, the time for fertility, for breeding? And I was kind of getting it figured out by that point, but then there was a knowledge check. And then she just kind of gently said, well, that's going to happen with you as well. Like, you will also have cycles of fertility. I was like, oh, but I understood because I could see in the real world what was happening. Mm-hmm. So, I'm just so grateful she did that she told me that. So I wasn't scared.
Yeah, beautiful. What I'm hearing is that we can to just simply reflect, what was your own first experience like, or what was your own early years experience like? And are you bringing any of that to the present moment in your conversation with your daughter? And so just a question for reflection, I think, is very helpful. Do you have any wounds from your own experience with your period? And are you bringing those wounds or those thoughts or those concepts forward as you begin to have these conversations? I know for me, I'll just share vulnerably, I was very young. I was 9. And so I was the very first girl in the class. And I remember being in the school bathroom, wrestling with all the papers and the little packaging. Pads back then were like 7,000 inches high, right? And came with so much packaging. And I remember the girl beside me was like, "What are you doing in there?" Because she could obviously hear all the wrapping. And I remember being like, "Nothing." Like, I had no idea. I felt so I was just so young and nobody else had their period. And so, I think I'm bringing personally like that awkwardness of being like different. And what I'm hearing from you and your mom's experience is that this is beautiful and also very normal. I think that's what I'm hearing. Like, this is normal. This is just something that happens. You saw it with the animals. Perhaps if you're like me and grew up in a city and you see it with animals, like, this is just a normal part of life. Anything else to add to this? Yeah.
I think that we have to recognize that even if we didn't have a personally traumatic experience, another thing that like the media and our culture has completely pushed this idea upon us that we should be very ashamed of it. I don't know if any of you remember YM magazine. Do you remember Young and Modern magazine, YM? And do you remember that, like, what was that section called? Like the embarrassing experiences section? Like there was a section where kids would write in. Do you remember what it was called? I don't remember.
No,
I
but
know you know
I
what I'm
know
talking about.
exactly. There was like flatulence talked about. There was, yeah, all kinds of things. Yes, absolutely.
But invariably, almost every, my most embarrassing moment, that's probably what it was called. Yeah, that makes sense. That would be right. Invariably, every month there was something in there about a girl getting her period unexpectedly, bleeding through, and everybody pointing and seeing, and it being this just mortifying, horrible experience. I mean, this was just kind of the worst thing that could possibly happen. I mean, really, I think that's what we all kind of picked up and assimilated from culture. Just that this is something very shameful. No one should ever know that you have your period. And if they do, that is horrible.
And that's why we're here. We're changing the conversation and making this something that is normal, natural, and actually something to be celebrated. Alrighty. So number one, examine your own personal story. Examine any wounds or baggage you might be bringing to this conversation with your daughter. The next thing. Oh, go ahead.
Well, the one thing that I do just want to say to like wrap that up, we actually, our program, The Cycle Show, is done with young girls. So 9 to 10 to 12-year-old girls, where we try to prevent them from having this horribly embarrassing experience. But we've actually had requests for The Cycle Show for grown women to place themselves back as a 9-year-old self and to go through this program again and to reimagine what it would have been like if the people around them would have responded differently to them. So basically to kind of unwind those wounds. And to basically forgive responses from adults and other people in your life that maybe made you feel embarrassed or small or belittled or shameful. And I think that that is just really fascinating that grown women are seeing value in going back into that 9-year-old self, that young, that confident, that really, like, when we're 9, we're kind of just fearless. Like we're kind of just, wow, the world's everything, and we can do anything. And then all of a sudden we start to doubt and feel embarrassed and we start to get smaller and we shrink. And so to go back to that experience and say, I forgive the people that didn't remind me that I didn't need to shrink. I forgive you.
Beautiful. I mean, and also very applicable for other areas of our life as well, not just those cycles. All right. That is so beautiful. So number one, recognize any baggage, any wounds, any concepts that you might be bringing from your own experience to the present day with your daughter. All righty. Number two, what language is helpful and what language is not helpful, Leah?
Okay, this is a personal preference, but I also think that this is my professional advice in this area as well, because I have worked with a lot of middle-aged and teenage girls and talked a lot about fertility. And it never ceases to amaze me the number of teenage girls that are very uncomfortable using anatomical terms, because somebody told them when they were, 10 years old that their hoo-ha, whatever is going to do whatever. And like they create these very strange words to try to explain what's happening to their body that nobody else understands, that really is kind of embarrassing for them, because they're trying to tell you maybe as a healthcare provider or as a responsible adult, something they're concerned about, and they're embarrassed because they don't know what it's called. So I always tell parents, use the anatomical terms. There is nothing embarrassing about the word vagina. There is nothing embarrassing about the word cervix or uterus or ovary. These are parts of our body, or breast or nipple. These are actual parts of our body. These are not dirty words. So I really encourage you to not shy away from those words. If it has not been your habit, if you've been made to feel very shamed by using anatomical terms, there needs to be some mind work done around that, because our bodies are good. And these are just the words that describe our body parts.
It's interesting how much our upbringing around these things can obviously have an influence, because I'm recalling like I have grown in this capacity because of my exposure to people like you, to be frank. But I definitely still sometimes get a little bit like vagina. Like, like I'll like whisper. I'll use the correct term, but I might not say it very loud. My older sons will always be like, "Oh, Mom," like they're always just like, "Just say the word, it's okay." So even my children have a little bit more comfort level with anatomical terms. So this is a really important thing that we all need to reflect on. And our question for reflection on this one is, what language might you need to swap in your own vernacular, or perhaps like me, just get a little bit more confident or a little bit more comfortable around? Yeah.
Yeah, so this is something in the cycle show that we try to be, we tell parents up front, we do a parent presentation just to inform them before the show happens, but we do tell them, we will be using the terms, anatomical terms. We will also be referring to the male anatomical terms. We will say the word penis. We will say these things because your children deserve to know. They deserve to understand and know if they're old enough to ask the question. If they're old enough to show curiosity and interest, then we need to trust that they're also, old enough to hear the truth, because it's just simply the truth.
Yeah, beautiful. And not to get too culturally, analytical right here, but if you look at the language that we use for personal body parts, just in, social, rap music and popular culture, right? We have very much disrespected the various parts of our bodies. And I think to reclaim the truth and just state the truth is very, very helpful. And again, this is the kind of change we want to see in our society. We want to just see people honoring their bodies for their natural functions. And so,
And I don't think most parents do this consciously. I think that it's just a care, because we're so uncomfortable talking about it sometimes, like we may tell our children, like, the pee-pee hole or the whatever hole, like we create these funny little, like, because we're thinking toddlers, but if we fail to update the vernacular for them, they carry these very infantile sort of understandings of these body parts into, oh gosh, this is a funny one. Actually, this has nothing to do with female anatomy, but when I was little, my dad convinced me that an armpit was called a tickle box.
oh, adorable. That's adorable.
I was convinced it was called a tickle box. And so come second grade or so, when I said something about, oh, my tickle box hurts, I don't remember what I said. And my classmates just lost it. And like, I didn't have a need for the word armpit because it was a tickle box. So, I mean, just these ridiculous sort of things, like you're not doing your kid any favors in the long run. Like just teach them the right terms right up front. It's perfectly fine. They can handle it.
And the mindset coach in me can't help but mention, again, if you grew up where perhaps there was shame around the name of the body part, then of course, unconsciously you've carried that for 20 plus years into your adulthood, right? But now in our adulthood, we get to be conscious. We get to be more conscious and have agency over our thoughts. And so we get to say the names, and we can do it without shame, without guilt, without fear. So examine the invitation right now is just examine what language might you currently need to swap in your own vernacular. All righty, Leah. All right, number 3.
Yes, the basics of a cycle. This is the third kind of point that I think this is critical, that we actually have an understanding of the purpose of a cycle and that we understand the very basics of it. Now, depending on the age of the conversation that you're starting, and this is going to be the final point, that it's not just the talk. This will come over a series of time. If you just try to dump all this information of the basics of a cycle and how a cycle works on a child, it's a lot to comprehend. Most adult women in our culture don't know the basics of their fertility cycle. So for a child, it's going to be slowly taught. So I think that the very first thing that we need to focus on is telling them, women, they understand that babies grow in mommy's tummies. They understand that mommies can have babies, that women's bodies are different. They grow breasts, like they have a different purpose. And that's really the very first connection that has to be made, is that periods have something to do with babies. That periods are because we can have babies. If we're not having periods, if we're not having cycles, we're not going to be able to be moms. So that's that very first connection that can be made very young. That's a conversation that I've had with my almost 4-year-old. She's 3. I don't know how much she comprehends at this moment, but we have these conversations pretty frequently. You know, that women's bodies, if it doesn't get pregnant, well, then it starts all over every month. It's going to shed, it's going to bleed. And that's a phrase I think that can be very scary. I think a lot of us shy away from talking about the fact that there's blood involved because we think, oh, a child is automatically going to equate blood with injury or disease or death or something really wrong because blood is so scary. And in a sense, it's actually kind of a nice, healthy conversation for us to just say, no, you know, sometimes our bodies bleed and we're okay. You know, sometimes we'll get bloody noses and it'll stop and it's okay. Sometimes blood will come out of us and we're not dying and we're not hurt and it's okay. And when a woman bleeds, she's going to do it every month if she doesn't have a baby. You know, it's just a very basic kind of removing the fear from a bodily function.
Yeah. One of the interesting things, I've been pregnant 11 times now. And so babies in my house are almost expected, if I'm just being really honest. You know, the kids are just like, oh, when's the next one coming? But that it's a very positive association in my house. So when I have mentioned, you know, well, a period means that like one day you'll be able to have a baby. That's created a very positive message around the cycle. All right. So for women like me, I'm one of those women who like, yeah, I kind of know the cycle, but I'll be honest with you. I was like, I don't know the names of the phases. I don't know if I could even really explain what's happening in all the phases. So Leah, this is fertility 101 for people like me who maybe know these words, but like aren't entirely sure maybe what is happening. Can you give us a fertility 101 lesson on the 4 phases of a woman's cycle?
Yeah, sure. And it's interesting. And the cycle show focuses this idea on, you know, it is a cycle, but we tend to only focus on the part of the cycle that we see, which is the period. And so that's what we tend to prepare our daughters for. And even this talk is even entitled that, like how to talk to your daughter about her first period. And really, that's not fair because we're focusing on only one of the phases of the cycle, which is actually one of the shorter phases. It's just the time when we bleed. We could focus more accurately and more positively on, quite frankly, the ovulation phase. Like that is the grand event of the cycle. You know, we have these cycles every month. Our body has this crazy, beautiful hormonal buildup and flow for the egg that is being made. And so if you want to really focus on positive language, that might be where you want to start, you know, because this isn't just about trying to prepare your daughter to not be scared when she's bleeding. It's more about her understanding and seeing her signs of fertility before she ever has that first period, because she is going to ovulate before that first period. Her body right now is working very hard, getting ready. We start seeing signs of breast buds. We start seeing some of that cervical mucus starting to come. Her body is trying to ramp up to that very first ovulation. And then you will see the period afterwards. So menstrual, you all know what that one is. It's the first roughly, 5 to 7 days of your period. Then we start the follicular phase. This is where we start to see the different hormones starting to shift and rise. We have a great graphic in one of our books in the Happy Girls Guidebook. For those of you that have our Happy Girls Guide to Being Whole, Teresa Kenny wrote this book, and we created this really awesome graphic. Oops, I don't know, you can't really see it very well, but you can see the different phases, the 4 phases. This is your menstrual phase right here, and this is the blood, the lining, and it all sloughs off. This is the thickness of your endometrial lining, and it goes down, and then it starts to slowly grow back up. But these are all the different hormones here and how they're interacting. So all of this is too much for a child. This is too much information for them to understand for this first kind of talk, these first conversations, because these first conversations are happening when they are little. This is really interesting information, though, for that 14, 15, 16-year-old girl. My 15-year-old daughter, she finds this fascinating. She's like, oh, okay, so it's the luteinizing hormone that spikes right before I ovulate. Oh, that's interesting. She loves that information now. She wasn't ready for that at 7 or 8, but as she grows, the pieces all start to come together. It all starts to make a more complete picture. So after that, follicular phase is the grand event, the ovulation. And there are lots of signs of ovulation that we can teach our daughters to see just for health purposes. yes, we teach our daughters very young that these cycles, this period, this whole thing is all about having babies. But quite frankly, there's going to be girls that are not interested in having babies. And that's not the reason that they should start paying attention to this. This is all just about female hormones and health. They need to be able to recognize this and see it as a sign of health. If you are menstruating, it means that your body is probably healthy. It means you're probably ovulating. It means you probably have good hormones going up and down very predictably every month, that you're healthy. And then that phase, that luteal phase, that's where we really start to see the progesterone start to drop off, and we're getting ready for our period. And that's where, it's important for our daughters to understand these hormones change. And that's why things like PMS or like crankiness or like moodiness, that it's not your fault. Like you shouldn't be ashamed of that. Like it's your body's way of saying, I need something different right now. And it might be space, and it might be rest, and it might mean a little more understanding, because my hormones are working right now. My body's doing something and my hormones are at work. So as moms, it's important for us to understand these different phases so that we can teach our daughter. In the book, we talk about it, winter, spring, summer, and fall. So, menstrual, winter, spring, summer, fall, that you feel different in each season. And that happens every month. You kind of go through this whole year of seasons. So there's lots of easy ways to explain it, but to help her understand that there's nothing wrong with her body changing.
So Leah, would you use these exact words speaking to somebody as young as 9?
I don't know that I would use these words. I don't know that I would say, you're in your follicular phase. I don't know that that's helpful for her. But what I would say something is like, well, you had your period, which means you've got another egg that's getting ready. You've got, your body is trying to prepare another egg, just in case you were going to get pregnant. You would need to have a healthy egg. And so that's what your body's doing right now. And then if you don't get pregnant, which you shouldn't be getting pregnant, and this is really where I think a lot of the discomfort comes in for most parents, because how does that happen? And if we're uncomfortable talking about sex, that gets uncomfortable. The conversation starts to get a little bit, I don't know. But we do it very quickly and very honestly in the cycle show, right in the very beginning, in the first hour of the presentation. We explain very quickly, but very appropriately, what the sexual act actually is. It is a male penis entering a female vagina, and that sperm is released, and it is the sperm meeting the egg that causes a pregnancy. And for the most part, they're at an age where they really just kind of receive it and hear it, and they're like, all right, like moving on. Like there's not a lot of trauma when you present it just very factually and, not in an embarrassing way.
I'm having a big aha. Can I share it with you?
Yeah, please.
I think I'm realizing why this is so uncomfortable for me. So much of the cycle I only learned when I was getting ready for marriage, and I was learning NFP from an instructor, and I did not have the relationship I have now with being open to getting pregnant anytime. And so, or let me rephrase that, like just being, I just didn't have the same mindset around openness in general to babies, like period, full stop. I wanted to wait a really long time. I thought that it was so important to build my career. I had many, many, many different thoughts about what fertility would do to my ability to contribute to the world. And as we're talking, I'm like, this is why I feel so awkward about it. Because for me, learning about a cycle was full of like, can't ever get pregnant because it's going to impede my ability to contribute. And so this is so interesting.
Which is the grand irony of the whole thing, because if you had been taught as a little girl all about your cycle, the slogan to the cycle show is, I can only protect what I value and respect. And when you have that understanding of, I'm protecting and caring for my body well, because I understand it and it's speaking to me, and I'm reading it and I'm listening and I'm paying attention to what I need, physically, emotionally, like all the different things that our hormones and our cycle tell us as a little girl. If you had been able to really like hone in on that as a sign of health Then when it comes to the point where you're considering learning this for family planning reasons, it has a totally different connotation, because now you're inviting another person in, your future spouse, your husband, into your cycle of health. You're inviting them in to help them see, this is what my body is doing at this moment. What is our shared intention right now? Do we want to be open to a pregnancy? Are we not open to a pregnancy? We're making these decisions together, but you are understanding that my body is what is going to govern when or if we have sex. If this is the system that we are using, if we are using my body as the guide, if we're going to allow my body to be as it is naturally and not expect me to change myself in some way, I'm inviting you into a very vulnerable space as my husband to respect my cycle. And that's what happens when little girls learn this.
Yeah. And I think this is why, like, I've become so passionate about this topic in recent months, because this truly is just one aspect of a grand conversation. And, we're focusing on this specific topic tonight, of course, and it's very helpful too. But it really is just one piece of a greater conversation of women's health and women's empowerment. So this is very exciting and very motivating. Okay, we've got some questions here. So the Happy Girls Guide, what age group would you say that book is most appropriate for?
Well, okay. I shared it with my daughter when she was about 14. She was actually one of the first readers for the book, because we were editing it and we were doing the artwork, and she was 14 and she was fine with it. However, I would say that I've been far more open with these topics than I think the majority of women. I think in a reasonable, confident age, I would be confident saying 16 years old to like 16 to 24 is kind of who this book is aimed at. But quite frankly, there's no top line for this book. I think a 35-year-old woman who never learned this could pick it up and still find it helpful, because it is, guys, like literally, it's everything about, how the different contraceptive pills work and how they're affecting and changing your body, how your hormones should work if they were naturally optimized, how, all the effects of different food. Talks about male fertility, and sometimes I just think we don't know a lot about these things. Sometimes we just have this assumption that pregnancy is just going to happen so easily, and to read something like this as a teenage girl and understand that a lot of things have to go exactly right to achieve a pregnancy, that shifts the conversation too a little bit. That it's not something that we just take for granted and that we're so terrified of, and that we just try to avoid perpetually, when we recognize and realize my fertility will decline with age. I have eggs, a certain number of eggs. I can't assume my partner has healthy virile sperm. I can't assume anything. So books like this, I think, just open the conversation, and they get us thinking a little bit differently than this like massive cultural messaging that we're receiving all the time.
Yeah, so good. Okay, so our question for reflection on this important point is, how confident are you in explaining this in a simple way? And if you are like me and would like to gain in some confidence, the book Happy Girl Guide that Guiding Star has put out by Dr. Teresa Kenny is a great resource for you. And then, of course, Leah's been mentioning something called The Cycle Show. Leah, just for anyone who might not be here, what is The Cycle Show?
Yeah, the cycle. And I actually see a comment in here. So Anna said something, I found a book that's good for girls, What's Going On with My Body, by Dr. Elisabeth Raith-Paula. So Dr. Elisabeth Raith-Paula is actually the founder of the Cycle Show. She is a wonderful physician in Germany, and she founded the Cycle Show. Gosh, I think it's got to be at least 20, 25 years ago now. And this has been a program that has been utilized in European countries for many years in the public school setting to help just teach fertility education to young girls. It's a 5-hour workshop for 9 to 12-year-old girls. And Guiding Star has acquired the exclusive license for the Cycle Show in the United States, meaning that we have permission to present the original Cycle Show, and that we are working with her actually to retranslate that book. So that book, What's Going On in My Body, has some strange translations because it's English, British English. And so it uses a couple weird words in there. We're like, that's not quite right. So we're actually working on a new publication to update that book to bring it to a young American girl audience. So I'm really excited about that, actually. But a Cycle Show is something that you can book. You can have it come to your community, a 5-hour workshop for up to 16 girls at a time. It's intimate. It's got this big, beautiful carpet uterus. We lays the uterus out on the floor, massive. And you take your little journey, like your egg journeys, the sperm journeys. It's an incredible story of how life begins, how our body works, how sometimes our body doesn't work. And it's just very honest conversations with girls, preparing them to begin cycling.
Beautiful. Sign me up. I'm not currently in the United States right now, but sign me up. I'm like, I want to sit on the carpet. Okay, very good. So just again, an invitation for personal reflection. How confident are you currently in explaining this in a simple way? I know that just as a result of this very short conversation, I'm feeling really compelled to read some of these resources and be able to just get myself schooled. All right. And the final thing that we're going to dive in tonight, and this one is the one that I am the most intrigued by, because I definitely, like, I am 39 years old. I have carried this thought with me for the last, how many years I've been a mother, that this needs to be a talk, like a serious.
And I bet that's paralyzing. Is that like paralyzing thinking that?
Yes. And I have, again, I've grown, obviously. So, and I'm a mindset coach. So I've been examining all of this. So I have been trying to introduce this in daily life. Again, I've been pregnant so many times. I miscarried. So there were many things that naturally just came up and naturally do come up. And so that has definitely happened, but this is what, and I'm curious, let me know in the chat. Are you like me and think that it has to be this like dramatic talk? In my head, I was like, I need to take my girls out to this like nice tea, which would be nice. Right. But in my head, it was like this very like momentous, somewhat dramatic, somewhat, so Leah, what can it be instead?
Well, I can tell you, I know. So my mom, I guess I would have had more akin to what you're talking about with the talk, because my mom did a knowledge check. She did a talk, like I think she realized, oh, I better check and make sure she knows, So that was my version of the talk, but really I kind of just pieced and figured a lot of it out myself. But she did fill in some pretty big gaps. I was glad she did that. I understood it much more clearly. But quite frankly, she should have been doing that for years. And so I was very intentional, and I am very intentional with my daughters that this comes up frequently. I'm also very transparent and open about my own fertility, my own charting. In my bathroom, right off in the drawer, is my fertility monitor. I use a Clear Blue Easy fertility monitor. That's the method I'm using currently. We've also had fertility charts sitting out. They've been around their entire childhood. We talk about it very openly. My husband he'll explain to the boys even, oh, your mom, she's got her period right now. She just needs a nap. She needs to rest right now. And just explaining it in a very normal way. I guess it's just making it part of the conversation of everyday life. Doesn't have to be that hard. You just kind of slip it in there and then you just keep going.
Yeah.
And then if they're ready to talk about it in those moments, they ask. But you just keep slipping it in over and over and over. Every opportunity you get, being transparent with it. Small daily ways. That's a really great way of saying it.
Yeah. And I love this. Like, how can you increase understanding and comfort? I just think that, for many of my friends, the understanding piece was severely lacking. Many of us kind of like trying to figure out many things on our own. I remember talking about tampon usage, and oh my word, like I just remember we were all just trying to figure it out. I just so many stories of a girl being like, I went through an entire box to try to figure out how to put one in. Like all these funny little memories are coming up, but increasing understanding and comfort, again, that this is normal, that this is amazing.
Well, and as moms, this is one of our like sacred kind of honors that we get to pass on to our daughter. Like, we get to be the person that tells her this. Don't abdicate that. Do not give that up and let her friends or her somebody else or her sex ed teacher, don't let somebody else be the person that forms her opinion about this. Like, you get to be the one that tells her she's beautiful and she's incredible and that she doesn't need to be scared and that her body's not broken, that this is how it should work and that you are healthy. And I'm so proud of you now because you're becoming a woman. Like, I would much rather replace the talk, like the sort of idea of like the talk, with like that celebration afterwards. Like, after she gets her first period, that you have a spa day, that you take her out, that you treat her well, that you know, she's becoming a woman. We do still have some cultural like markers of time passing, you know, like I think of Mexico has this beautiful, you know, quinceañeras when you turn 15, like these passages of time, these moments where we recognize you are becoming someone new. And we've kind of lost that in our culture. We don't celebrate that well enough. And so I'd rather replace the talk with this sort of like, I'm so proud of you. You're growing into a new version of yourself. Like, you're growing into the next phase of yourself, and celebrate that. Like, make that the big thing.
I think that's my key takeaway from this conversation, is that I can be the one to inform my daughters of what their period means and that it can be celebratory, and that I don't have to let other people inform.
You get to be the one, Lisa. You get to be the one that she's going to entrust. And really, I've seen moms that have done this really well, because they're also the moms that these girls come back to when they're, you know, in labor. And they're also the moms that these girls come back to when they're learning to breastfeed. And these very vulnerable moments where you're transitioning into the next version of yourself. Like, I'm becoming a young woman. I trust my mom to guide me. I'm becoming a mother. I trust my mom to guide me. I'm learning to breastfeed. Who do I call? I call my mom. And so to get to be that person is such a gift.